David Nixon. David, welcome back to the show.
Hey, what's going on, fellas?
How's the summer treating you, my friend?
It's fantastic. It's a great summer. The weather's been great, and like you said, golf's been great as well. You and I golfed just a week and a half or so ago.
Yes, and you played much better than I did for the majority of that. So congratulations.
It's always hit and miss. Don't worry, Spencer.
Look, David, I know you've played some courses, some really impressive courses. What's the one you haven't played that's on the bucket list?
Pebble Beach. And I've got to get out there soon, but that's the one that's still on the list I haven't played is Pebble.
Nice.
So that's it. We're going to do a BYUSN Pebble Beach Day here soon enough. So get your clubs warmed up there, Jason.
Yeah. We're working on that.
Will do.
Dave, huge news with BYU football last week with Media Day. Of course, the news that Neil Pa'u, he has an uncertain football future after he was arrested for his DUI. And then, of course, all of these position changes. That has us thinking, specifically with Dayan Gawoliku, who said he's going to play cornerback. You're a defensive guy, David. Which is the strongest position group on this BYU defense after some position movement?
I think it has to be that secondary. I think with Dayan back there, I think you got Austin Lee, you got Troy Warner. You got a lot of guys that have experience. That was one of the positives from last year with everyone going down with injuries and being banged up is you had a lot of these younger kids, Malik Moore, that got some work. Chris Wilcox, of course, has been kind of a mainstay back there, but D'Angelo Mandel, Isaiah Heron. I mean, there's a lot of guys that were out there playing last year that got reps, and, now they're ready to – they've had some game experience and now ready to go out there and play. So I think that secondary, I think the backers will be solid, and there's names that we're familiar with, but you got Zane Anderson coming off injury, Isaiah Kafusi coming off injury. So you got guys that have been banged up a little bit. They're going to have to, shake off some rust. But I like that secondary. And then, of course, the defensive line, you got the mainstay, which is you always need a strong nose tackle because he really is the anchor of your defense. You got Kyrus Tonga, who's arguably the best defensive player this year on the entire unit. You look at the roster for BYU's defense, and it's solid up and down. And when you ask what's the strongest unit, I think you say secondary, but I think we'll find that this linebacker crew, once they kind of get a chance to gel together and go out there and do their thing, I think you'll be surprised by them. And then defensive line, I think you'll see guys that will kind of emerge and be go-to guys, Bracken O'Bakary and Trajan Peely. These type of guys will emerge and be true playmakers.
David, whether it's a position group or a storyline, what's your biggest question regarding this team right now?
I think offensively, you look at, Zach Wilson had a fantastic year last year, but who's he going to throw the ball to? And I think that's the biggest worry, especially now, as you mentioned at the beginning of this interview with Neil Pa'u being out. You look at the receiver crew, Gunnar Romney, Micah Simon, Talon Shomway, Alevi Hifo, Dax Milne. You add up all their touchdowns from last year combined, that's including Neil Pa'u, combined 9 touchdowns. That's less than 1 a game. And so there's just not a go-to guy in there right now, and I think that's what has to emerge. Of course, you got Matt Bushman and Moroni coming back who are your studs. And in fact, Matt Bushman, out of those receivers that I mentioned, had more receptions and more yards than any of them. And so I'm not worried about the tight ends, but I'm saying on the wide receiver, when you need a guy to run a 9 route, when you need a guy to run a fly route down the field who can stretch the defense vertically, who is going to be that guy? Who's going to go up and make a play for the ball and go for it? I don't know. And I think, of course, we all hope it's Gunnar Romney or Talon Shomway. They've shown some flashes of brilliance. But at the end of the day, there's just not a lot of experience there. And frankly, there's not a lot of production. And so the biggest question mark for me on the offense side of the ball, and frankly for the entire team, is the wide receiver crew. And I know Festi Staki's coaching them up. He's doing a great job there. But somebody's got to emerge because you look at BYU's teams in the past, they've always had an Austin Collie or Cody Hoffman or a true playmaker to go to when it is 3rd and 8 and you need a first down. Who's your reliable guy? And I think right now there's some question marks around that crew. So that's for me is the one area that is a cause for concern. But I'm also confident somebody will step up to the plate and make a splash.
David Nixon with us on BYU Sports Nation, former BYU outstanding linebacker, 4 years in the NFL. We're discussing the 2019 BYU team. And, David, this is a loaded question, but one that we've been bouncing off of each other here in Studio B for a while now. What would qualify as success in terms of a win-loss record for BYU this season, given the difficulty of the schedule, or at least we think it's difficult because of what we see on paper?
I think, listen, you got to have a winning record first and foremost. I think a 7-5 type approach is where you need to be. But then I think you take small victories in there, and I think you look at it as kind of seasons within a season, right? And BYU's first 4 brutal games. Can you come out of there 2-2? I think that's a victory. And then as you move throughout the season, can you protect LaVell Edwards Stadium? Can you win at home? And so for this team, I think the grand scheme, yeah, you can throw out there the 7-5 or 8-4, whatever it may be. But I think BYU needs to kind of move beyond that in the sense that they've got to win at home. And that's something that, Spencer, you and I were talking about. My last 3 years there, we were 18-0 at home. And, playing at home was special. And that was a place that you protected. And you didn't let teams come in there and beat you up. And that's something that this BYU team has struggled with in years past is, playing at home. In fact, we joked last year when they won at Wisconsin, there was a while there they almost played better on the road than they did at home. And there were some comments by certain players kind of backing that up. And so they've got to get back to owning the field at home and playing well there. But, it's a tough schedule. In fact, arguably probably the most difficult independent schedule we've had, top to bottom. And you look at the depth of the schedule. But at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think that's what's most exciting is this is what, as a player, this is what you want. You want to play these 4 P5 schools to kick off the season. I mean, you want to play on the biggest stages. And that's exactly what they're doing. So the opportunity is there. And the question is, can the team take advantage of it?
David, you could not have set up our next question any better. Obviously, the focus, at least to begin the year, is on that first month with all the P5 teams. Now, you do have, 3 of those at home, which is certainly a good thing. Which of the first 4 games do you believe are winnable?
All of them. I mean, you go back to last year. Nobody thought BYU could go into Wisconsin, ranked 6th in the country at the time and beat them. But this team believed it. And frankly, as a competitor, as a football player, you have to think you can win. When you step on that field, you have to go out there and know that I'm going to beat that team. And maybe it doesn't happen, but you've got to have that confidence. Otherwise, you're going to lose every game. So those guys are training right now. They're running sprints. They're out there in the heat, lifting weights. It's miserable right now. But they all have that goal in mind: is when that first game kicks off against Utah, that they're prepped and ready and that they can run the table and put it all together. But from a realistic perspective, for me, I don't think there's any reason why they can't go 2-2. It's well documented. Utah's going to be their toughest game in that whole stretch. I mean, they've returned a lot of horses, and they've got a lot of experience on that team. Whereas in the rest of them, I think there's some key positions that were up for grabs. You look at Washington, new quarterback. USC's kind of been in flux a little bit. Tennessee, I think they're still trying to find their identity. So there's teams that are frankly almost the same boat as BYU, and that they've got great tradition, and they've had flashes of brilliance throughout their last decade or so, but they're all kind of in this pattern of trying to figure themselves out. So it's a great time to catch Tennessee and USC. Of course, Washington had a fantastic year last year, but they're rebuilding a little bit with the talent that's left. So for me, there's no reason why BYU can't go 2-2 in that first month and come out of there with some guys have gained that experience and they're ready to roll throughout the rest of the schedule.
David, over the weekend, conference realignment was floated back out there into the sports stratosphere, and people took it and ran with it. UConn is going back to the Big East in all sports except for football. And now their football team is left to wonder, are they going to be a member of the American, or are they going to end up in CUSA? Are they going to end up in the MAC, or are they going to go independent and go the BYU route? And then all of a sudden BYU fans are thinking, well, maybe the Cougars should take the Husky spot in the American because it's time. Does BYU to the American Athletic Conference make any sense to you?
First off, you have to love June and July when the NBA finals are over and there's no sports on. So of course this stuff gets floated out there to try to occupy us for the next 2 months. And I actually can appreciate it because it actually provides some type of entertainment. Here's the thing. Unless the AC can go out there and get, poached from the Mountain West and try to be really the first superpower conference out there with a 16-team conference where they can go get BYU, Boise State, take the cream of the crop of the Mountain West, San Diego State. If they can pick off those teams and maybe try to create that big power conference, super conference, if you will, I think maybe it's worth looking at. But if not, if it's just a swap, UConn and BYU out, I think that's just a lateral move, and I don't think it's worth it by any means. But if they can set the trend of trying to be the first mover, like I said, maybe it's worth entertaining. I still think BYU, of course, just continues to hold out, continues to ride the wave of independence, and hope that in a few years, whenever everything's expected to shift again, that they're in prime position to be swept up into one of those P5 conferences. But I think seeing what the AAC can put together, I think it's always worth entertaining, because maybe you get kind of a western side of the AAC, so where your traveling's not as bad as it might be. But it's fun to entertain. I still think a P5 school or a P5 conference is the way to go, and it's only a matter of time, I think. And yes, waiting in the meantime is painful, but I don't think BYU is desperate by any means, and I don't think it's worth jumping ship just because there's an opportunity. I think it's something that Tom will have to evaluate and continue to kind of monitor the landscape of what's going on out there and make the best decision.
Thank you for bringing logic to that question, David. It's a weight game for sure, with those big Power 5 contracts on the TV side coming up in 2023 and 2024. Great stuff, man. Follow him and his blue check mark at @D_Nixon. We'll talk to you again soon, brother.
Okay, awesome, guys. Take care.